Pal campus of Azim Premji University. Today's session is titled From Farm to Factory, How Does Economics Work? And I'll be taking the first part, which deals with agriculture. Now, as we all know, food has been domesticated all over the world to satisfy hunger. And as a process, regions across the world have developed their own agricultural ecosystems. But in the last century, there have been major shifts and changes in the way agricultural production is organized. Agrarian change has come about as a result in changes in irrigation patterns, changes in land ownership, cropping choices, integration with markets, shifts in labor use patterns, and advancement in technology. When we talk about agricultural production, we need to keep in mind some of the major factors of production. Obviously, the first and most important one which comes to mind is land. Now, I'm sure all of you know what land is, how is it used in agriculture. I would just take a minute to bring your attention to two very key concepts which are used in agricultural production, in analyzing agricultural production. The first one is ownership holding. So now ownership holding is the land owned by an agricultural household. Another concept is operational holding, which is the land which is used for cultivation. And to differentiate between these two, you can have a simple mechanism. So whenever you add any land that you have hired in from someone else to your ownership holding and subtract what you have leased out to somebody else, you reach operational holdings. And whatever you cultivate on becomes your operational holding. Usually, these holdings are categorized or measured at the unit of a household. Another factor of production is labor use. Everybody knows how labor is extremely crucial in any kind of production process. When it comes to agriculture, we need to identify between different kinds of labor and different contracts of labor. By different kinds, I'll just talk about two main ones, which is family labor and hired in labor. Family labor is usually associated with small scale farms or subsistence farms, which usually have production at a smaller scale, and they use family labor to take care of most of the production processes. As the farm size increases, usually there is increase in the amount of labor which is hired in to complete agricultural processes. Another categorization is manual labor versus machine labor. Manual labor is technically labor used by human beings in the process of cultivation. Countries in the global south have been highly dependent on manual labor for a very long time. It is only recently that we have moved to the use of machines in agriculture, but this transformation has been rapid. So, in a span of less than 50 years, large parts of agricultural production in India are now machine dependent. I'll be talking about this in detail in some time. The third factor of production that we need to keep into account is capital. Now, by capital, I mean something very specific. I'm talking about investment in agricultural production. Obviously, when you need to produce something, you need to invest some sort of capital or money, right? Now, when we're talking about investment in agriculture, we have to keep in mind the unequal access to credit. Usually, whenever an agricultural household wants to invest money, either they depend on their savings, which has come from agricultural incomes, or they are dependent on credit. Now, savings in agriculture or surplus in agriculture is usually restricted by factors of production like availability of land, prices, yields, etc. Access to credit, on the other hand, is dependent on some sort of collateral that a person can offer or a household can offer. Usually, for agricultural households in India, it is in the form of agricultural land. So, if you go to a bank and you show that you have 2 acres of land, you are eligible to get some credit. But this means that if you own 2 acres of land, you can only get less amount of credit as opposed to somebody who owns 30 acres of land. And now if you want to move, if you want to buy more land, if you want to lease in or rent more land, or if you want to make a change and shift to a new crop, you need investment. For this, you can then go to non-institutional credit sources. By this, I mean it could be relatives, friends, but usually it is professional money lenders which charge a relatively higher rate but give you access to credit. This is very prevalent in rural India, even in urban India for different consumption purposes. But in rural India, it is also very prevalent for agricultural purposes. Now that I've told you some of the basic points about agricultural production, I'm going to take the rest of this session to tell you a story. The story of agrarian change in southern Madhya Pradesh. Southern Madhya Pradesh is, I'm actually sitting in southern Madhya Pradesh, but the story is of a region which is around 70 kilometers from Bhopal, which is where our university is situated. Just a bit about Madhya Pradesh. It has not been performing very well in economic and social indicators, but parts of this state have shown tremendous agricultural growth. So every year when there's talk about wheat production, there's talk about bumper crops, you hear the name of Madhya Pradesh on top of the charts or somewhere among the top three states. The reason why this agricultural growth has been accelerating and has been taking place at a great rate is because of this region in southern Madhya Pradesh, which is also called the Central Narmada Valley Agroclimatic Zone. Now, this region is specific because it has been irrigated by canals of reservoirs built on tributaries of river Narmada. Canal irrigation came to this region in mid 1970s, and since then there have been a channel of canals connecting this region and irrigating the fields in this region. And based on this canal irrigation, there has been massive transformation in the way agricultural production was conceptualized and organized in this region, that is southern Madhya Pradesh, the irrigated parts of Narmada Valley. And then this has led to this part becoming one of the largest wheat producing regions in India, right? So I'll just tell you where it is. So all of you know that Madhya Pradesh is in the center of India, right? So the part towards the middle center of India, middle center of Madhya Pradesh, that is where the region that I'm talking about is situated. I will start the story around 50 years ago in the early 70s. Till early 70s, this region, which is the Narmada Valley region, now what are the irrigated parts, used to be a single crop, used to have a single cropping season. Now, this is a very important terminology in agricultural economics. Single cropping seasons mean when you can take only one crop per year on a particular piece of land, right? So till 1970s, farmers were growing grains like jowar. They were taking tur dal, which is a very common yellow-colored pulse consumed in India, and small quantities of wheat because the wheat yields were very less. In 1972, began the construction of a dam on Tava River, and in 74, the construction was complete and canals started irrigating the fields in southern Madhya Pradesh. Now, on the other side of the canal or the dam, the problem was there was displacement of multiple communities. There was displacement of livelihoods. People were rendered jobless overnight. Their lands were taken away from them. But the focus of my story is the other side, the irrigated side of the dam, which benefited from the irrigation. So once irrigation came into this region, there was expansion in wheat production. This happened because wheat requires 4 rounds of irrigation. Now, once there is certainty that state government will release water in the canal, which will irrigate the fields, people become sure that they can produce wheat and they will get higher yields because there is certainty of irrigation. So this slowly people started shifting towards wheat and stopped cultivating grains like jowar and tur dal. And then wheat became the prominent rabi crop. So to the point that if you go to a field today in southern Madhya Pradesh, in the months from November to March, you will find nothing but golden fields of wheat, right? So Madhya Pradesh gradually transformed into a wheat producing hub based on growth in southern wheat cultivation in southern Madhya Pradesh. Very interestingly, around the same time when dam was being constructed and canal irrigation was being planned, soybean was introduced as a new cash crop in this region. It was introduced by the state government to boost agricultural incomes. Now, soybean was a new plant. People here were not used to cultivating it. Soybean is not even consumed locally. Then you might think, why was it being, why was the state government asking farmers to cultivate it? It's because soybean cakes were being exported for animal feed to different countries. Keeping that in mind, that there is an export demand for soybean, this crop started being cultivated. In the beginning, locals were not very comfortable growing a new crop because they had never seen it before, they had never tasted it before, they had never seen it growing in anybody's fields. However, they realized soon enough that soybean is a very pest resistant plant. So it doesn't have, you don't need to spray a lot of fertilizers, you don't need to spray a lot of pesticides, and it is cultivated in the monsoon season. So irrigation is also taken care of. Yields were also pretty high because it was new to the soil there. So the cropping pattern changed from a single annual crop to a double cropping season now. So there was wheat in the winter months followed by soybean in the monsoon months. Now, this obviously transformed the agricultural pattern, the way land was being used, the way labor was being used, and the way investment was going into the agriculture. So land obviously became double cropped. Yields from land increased because now you had two crops. So at the same time, income also increased. There was surety of irrigation for wheat, and soybean did need a lot of inputs. This meant that farmers were now taking incomes twice from the same field. However, this made a major change in the land rental market because now land was more profitable. Therefore, land rent went up, which means if you want to increase the size of your operational holding by leasing in more land, you will have to pay higher rents. Thus, the story continues. For the next 2 decades, soybean and wheat played a transformative role in increasing agricultural incomes. While this was happening, people were also exploring options of different labor contracts. So earlier there was high dependence on family labor. Now that they were taking two crops, it was becoming difficult to use only family labor. They started hiring in labor on a weekly basis or paying them on a monthly basis. But at the same time, they've also become aware of changes happening in technology, and tractors and combine harvesters from Punjab started coming into central India for rental purposes. And people realized if you have only one crop going in a field, which is also called monoculture, you can actually harvest everything in one go. If you have different crops, say vegetables, some part of wheat, some part of jowar going in the same field, you cannot harvest it together. Each thing has to be harvested separately at different points of time. But if you move to the practice of monoculture, where you have only one crop in the entire field, you can harvest it in one go. And when you have access to harvesters, it will take around 20 minutes and you can harvest 1 acre land, right? So this makes a massive shift in the way labor is being conceptualized now. Instead of hiring groups of people for weeks, you are now hiring a harvester for, say, half a day and getting your field harvested. This meant that dependence on hired labor was being substituted by dependence on machine labor. But till now, till the 1990s, machine labor was on rental purposes. People started realizing that it'll be easier if they owned their own tractors, right? And at the same time, banks were also giving agriculture a push. So they started giving loans for tractor purchase. This meant that a lot of households in the region started purchasing or investing in agricultural assets. However, now comes the twist in the story. Though the soybean, which used to be pest resistant, is no longer pest resistant. The soil is no longer responding to soybean cultivation. Yields are declining. There has been unpredictable monsoon, which has led to loss of standing crop. This is a very important, actually a very tragic phenomenon which takes place in Indian agriculture. Sometimes there's a large dry spell in which plants are not able to grow. And sometimes there is a torrential rain when there is a standing crop in the field and the crop collapses and the yields decline drastically. So soybean has been declining. Cost of production has been increasing because now you need to spray multiple rounds of pesticide to keep your crop safe. So farmers started looking for a new option, something that could give them better yields. They wanted increase in incomes. They were also looking for investing the money that they earned from wheat cultivation into something else. Now I would like to just take a detour and tell you about how uh, agricultural machinery from Punjab has been coming into central India for more than 3 decades. This means that people from Punjab have regularly been visiting central India and they have been coming here to see what they know. They have the technical know of how the soil is, what is the soil quality, what kind of crops are grown, what is the yield, what are the prices, etc. At the same time, yields in Punjab have been saturating. Land is becoming less responsive, and people have been moving out in search of newer pieces of land. So in the 1990s, we also had an influx of Punjabi farmers who sold their lands in Punjab, moved to central India, and bought large tracts of land, averaging around 100 acres. Now, when they came to central India, they did not only come with the money to invest in land, they also came with the knowledge on how to cultivate different crops that they were used to cultivating in Punjab, which were basically wheat and paddy. Now comes the introduction of paddy in central India. Paddy is very intensive in terms of investment that you need to put in before you start the cultivation. You need to secure a source of irrigation, which is usually in the form of deep tube wells. You need to prepare your land. You need to have some sort of treatment done to the land before you can move to paddy cultivation, which makes it expensive. But people in this region had made incomes based on soybean and wheat cultivation and were ready to take this leap. However, it was not homogeneous. As is usually happens, the lead was taken by rich and large land owning households, which had larger pieces of land and which had agricultural surplus that they could invest or reinvest in agriculture. So slowly, around to early 2000s, small number of farmers who were from the local region started cultivating paddy. This paddy was the same paddy that was being cultivated by farmers in Punjab, the same long grain paddy which resembles basmati but does not have the GI tag. It is usually local in local dialect. It's also called Pakistani dhan because it has a scent of the basmati which is cultivated in Punjab, and it is called Pakistani dhan there. So now the shift happens from wheat to soybean, and soybean gets slowly replaced by paddy. This replacement is still ongoing. So as I'm talking, even this agricultural season, some farmers are making the shift from soybean to paddy based on their own agricultural incomes. Now, they've already invested majorly in increasing irrigation facilities because they wanted to cultivate paddy. This gives them a leeway into cultivating a third crop. So wheat is harvested in the month of March. Paddy is sown in or transplanted in the month of June. Between this time period, farmers decided to take a short 60-day crop, which is the moong dal crop. So there's now an entry of a third crop, which can now be taken between the Kharif and Rabi seasons, and it will lead to excess income or additional income. Again, this crop now is dependent on how you interact with the state government or the state machinery, because again, this crop will be cultivated in the months of April, May, and June, which will be very hot, and you will need irrigation facilities. One thing is to tap into your own irrigation mechanism. The other thing is to work with the state and see if canal water can come. And that is exactly what happened. Farmers of this region lobbied with the along with the politicians from the region, and canal water was released in the months of March, April, and May, which then led people to increasingly take an additional crop, which they thought could boost agricultural incomes and was less risky because it was only a 60-day crop, right? So the transformation that has happened is from a single cropping season to now a triple cropping season with three crops back to back. The field is not left fallow at any point of time. This obviously means the soil quality will be impacted, right? But this also means that agricultural incomes will be relatively safer. Why I'm saying relatively safer? Because you cannot predict with agriculture. Even if you have a standing crop and there's a bout of rain, the yields could go back down. Or if there is no procurement process taking place, or if there is no marketability of that product, prices can go down. But that's a story for another time. So now you have this change which has come about, but this also means that agriculture has become very fast paced. Usually we talk about life saying that now life is very fast paced. In terms of agriculture, it is even worse, or even the need to be fast paced is much more, because now the day they harvest wheat, the next day they have to sow moong, and when they harvest moong dal, which is a green pulse very commonly consumed in India, they have to then transplant paddy. So there is absolutely no free time. They have to, it's one crop after the other. Now, this is a very common practice in large parts of India, which have irrigation facilities called monocropping. So you have one single crop in the field in one season, followed by the second crop and then third crop, and the same pattern repeats year after year, right? This means because it is so fast paced, dependence on machines is inevitable. If you depend on manual labor, you will not be in time to cultivate these three crops. So there is complete dependence. Even if you own a small land piece of 2 acres, you will have to rent in harvesters to do the harvest. You will have to rent in other machines like tractors and rotavators to do other parts of the process. I will briefly just talk about the exchange relations or the goal of production. So initially, when the story had started 50 years ago, people were, because the yields were so less, a large part of the cultivated crop was actually consumed by the household itself. There was not much left to be sold on market, and even if it was sold on market, the prices were not very high. In the last 50 years, with mechanization, with higher yields, with improvements in integration with agricultural markets, and with increases in connectivity between southern Madhya Pradesh and different parts of India, the cultivation is no longer done. The goal is no longer for self-consumption. Households reproduce themselves through market exchange. What I mean by this is that they usually sell most of their produce in the market, right? And it is the considerations of marketability and profit margins which have encouraged this monocropping in the region. Otherwise, they could just be cultivating some part of vegetable, some part of their land would be used for vegetables, some part could be used for something else. But now they're only focused on wheat, paddy, and moong because they know this will bring them higher profits, and then they can buy things off the market. This is not a very good practice, but this is what makes rational sense to farmers in this region. This has also meant that we see a drastic change in the cropping pattern, that it is now homogeneous. So it is same across different scales of production. I will just end by showing you a couple of pictures. So when I'm talking about canal irrigation, usually we tend to think of something huge, right? But the topmost picture, that is one of the canals which irrigate southern Madhya Pradesh. It is a narrow strip of water which flows and is then connected to various fields using different methods. The one on the left-hand side bottom is a picture in which wheat produce has been secured and harvested and secured in gunny sacks, which will then be sold in the market. It is being sprayed with some sort of disinfectant before being uh, 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 packed in gunny sacks. And the final picture is that of a paddy field. So you see these small divisions in the field, right? This is what requires money. So to make a field like this and to fill it with water, you need to invest extra money, and that is why paddy is much more cost and requires much more cost than other crops. I will stop my screen sharing here. I'll be happy to take any questions in the end, but I would just request you to think about how different factors of production have interplayed and interconnected with each other as the story has progressed. Thank you so much. I'll take the questions at the end.
Yeah. Thanks, Sunit. That was interesting. I think
Thank you.
you made it quite understandable, if I can use the word, for school students. So,
Thank you.
now let's hear Shiuli. And after that, I think probably, I know both your sessions are quite interconnected. And then we'll take questions towards the end before we the next session. So, are you able to share your screen, Shiuli?
Yes, I'm just doing that. Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to the last day of the summer school. Sunit, my colleague, was talking about agricultural production in the first part of this session. I would like to briefly talk about farm production or factory production and take an example or an experiment which we do in class to explain how does production work, right? Hello. Hi.
No, carry on, carry on.
Okay, yeah. This is a picture taken from the internet, but you can see there is a farm, an agricultural farm, and the other side it looks like a factory, right? It's a more concrete picture of factory. When we say factory or a firm, what does come in our mind? That there is like a big structure where some process is going on, and there are machines and individuals or laborers, workers inside that firm, right? So in economics terminology, we say firm is a organization, it's a business organization that is producing and selling goods or services for profit.
Today, but I disabled.
So it would be nice if people can mute themselves. So what is a firm? So I was just trying to explain that firm is a business organization which is selling goods or services for profit in the market, right? When we say firm or a factory, we generally think of a physical location, right? But it's not necessary. Many firms can be working remotely or online, or have a distributed production network where some a part of the production is happening at one place, another part of the production is happening another place, then you are selling the product in another market. So it can be a distributed sort of process as well, right? And when we say production, what do we mean by production? So we are converting inputs into outputs using a process of production, right? Or a technology for production. Now, inputs generally mean you have labor, capital, and some raw materials, and then outputs could be goods or services which you are selling in the market, right? Moving on, I will keep talking about labor and capital. Sunit also talked about it. Basically, when we say labor, we mean workers, right? People who are doing work. Now, it could be physical work, it could be mental work, but they are exerting some effort to do something, right? And when we say capital, it could mean a number of things, but it could be wealth or money or assets or machines, right? So basically, in order to simplify the production process, we say that labor and capital both are used in production process, right? Now, let's imagine a situation where a firm is trying to produce something, but you have fixed capital, right? So the amount of money which you have, or like say the factory which you have, the number of machines which you have, all of those are fixed, right? And you would like to see how many labors I should employ so I can achieve, let's say, or I can produce at the most efficient level of production, right? And I can earn as much profit as it is possible given the capital which I have. So in economics, then what we try to do is we say that what will happen if, let's say, I keep increasing the number of labor, right? So your capital is fixed. The let's say the raw material which you can use, the machines which you have, all of that is fixed. Now the question which you're trying to do is how many people to employ, right? How many workers I should have so that I can reach a level of a production which is efficient, right? If I go beyond that, I will start incurring a loss, right? So in order to explain that, what we do is do an experiment or a game which we call paper plane game in a classroom setting, right? So these pictures actually show actual planes but we can't do that really in the classroom, right? So in a factory, there are different processes which are happening, right? So different parts of the plane are being manufactured, then they are combined together, then there is a specific technology which is used in this production process. Then there are a lot of other things which we go before you sell or you put that plane for sell in the market, right? Now what here we are doing this online, so you can't actually participate in it, but in a classroom setting, all the students in the classroom will be actually participating in it. And instead of actual plane, what we are trying to do is we are trying to make paper planes, right? Let's say that there is a paper airplane factory, right? There are students which are divided into groups, right? And in each group there are different number of students, right? So each student, you can imagine, is a worker, right? Is a labor to the in the production process. Now the objective of each firm in this setup is to maximize the production of planes, right? And that's similar to what firms try to do in the real world, right? Now the raw material which you have is paper, right? So for making planes, paper planes, you have capital, which is, let's say, table and a marker, and we will give you in a minute the design, right? How would you construct paper planes, right? In an actual situation, that will be the technology. Now, so there is a shortage of raw material, so paper will be rationed, right? You can't use as much raw material as you would like. Capital is also limited. You have one table per firm, one marker per firm, and you will be graded on the quality of paper planes, right? So in real world setup, if there are products which are not up to the quality, they will be rejected. Similarly here, if the planes are not up to the quality, they will be rejected, right? Paper planes. So what is the process? You are divided, the students have been divided into different groups, right? Each group represent one firm. They have been given a name, right? So each firm has a name. You have one marker, right? And you have 3 minutes to produce as many planes as you can, right? So in the real world, you can think that there is a time limit to the production process, right? If you want to compete with other firms in the market, you would like your product to be in the market around the same time as other firms are producing. You can't take forever to do the production process, right? And you have to follow the design, right? Let's say it's there are some standards set up by the government about the production process or the quality of the product, and you have to follow that. Now, how would you build the paper plane, right? So it's like you will get a piece of paper, you have to cut it into 2 parts, equal parts. Then you will have to make the plane. Right, this is the process which is shown. Most of the people know, but we'll also demonstrate this in the class, that you have to make planes like this. You have to write the name of your firm on the plane, and you have a time limit. So each group of students have to make as many planes as they can in 3 minutes, following this specific way of making paper planes. And if there are any planes which are unfinished by 3 minutes, that will be rejected. Now, there will be a testing process to see that the planes which you have made, whether they meet the standards of quality or not. So these are some of the criteria which we will use for testing it. And then in the end, what will happen, that there will be somebody who will be testing the quality of the plane, and you will have to, your group will, one member from your group will be assigned to fly the planes. And so we'll see how does it fly straight without crashing, and there will be a line, whether it crosses that line or not. So this is the process, right? Now, what are we trying to do? So we have given raw material as paper to different groups. We have given a table to each group and to make the planes, to use the table for making the, cutting the paper into half, making the planes. And we have given a marker for you to write the name of the firm on each plane. So it's a very simple, straightforward process, right? Now, what we are trying to do is we are changing or the number of students in each group, right? So in real world, what you are doing is you are seeing that if I have 10 worker versus if I have 20 workers versus if I have 30 workers, how does the production of a particular good change, right? In this setup, because we are doing it in one point of time, what we are trying to do is we are making groups of different numbers of students, and let's say 2 students in one group, 3 students in one group, 4 in one group, 7, 8, whatever in other groups, right? And we see that what happens when you increase the number of students per group, right? So can we automatically assume that as the number increases, when the of workers or students increases while your capital is constant, right, does that automatically increase your production, right? And does it keep on increasing as you keep on increasing the number of workers, right? I'll show you the result. This is from one of the games which we actually did in the class with the econ cohort, first year econ students, first year undergraduate econ students, right? So now you can see the table, right? Now the first column, the first column shows the names of different groups, right? And they are just given random names, right? They represent in this hypothetical situation the name of different firms, right? And now labor here represents the number of students in each group. or number of labor or workers in each firm, right? Now and then we play this game 3 times, right? So we are trying to repeat the production process and see what happens at each round, right? Do we keep on producing the same number of planes, or it varies, right? So you can see that in round 1, with 2 workers, they were able to produce 1 plane which met the standards and which were not rejected, or which were proven of good quality after test. So with 2 labors 1, with 3 2, then with 4 4. So you see that as the number of workers are increasing, the number of planes are increasing, right? It keeps on increasing till you reach Star Wars, where 6 people produce 11 planes, right? Then after that, there is a fall, right? There is a fall, and then there is an increase again, right? For round 2, you see the same till 6 number of workers it increase, then it falls, then there is a rise again. For round 3, there are more fluctuations, so it's falling, then increasing, then remains constant, then falls, then increase, right? Now one might say, what are the different things which are working here, right? So one is, of course, the number of workers, right? But there are other things which are important for a production process within a firm or within a group, right? How well coordinated they are, how efficient is the production process, right? What is the level of, let's say, trust between the group members or between the different parts of the production process. And so labor is one, but there are other things which make it important to understand how many planes will be produced with different in different firms, in different rounds, with different number of students, right? Now in economics terminology, we called it total product, right? So total product is the total number of an output or a good, or in this case paper plane, being produced, right, in each firm, right? Or in this case each group of students. Now the other thing which we are interested in is to understand the average product, right? So how many planes are produced per worker or per student in this setup, right? And what we do is we divide the total number of planes by total number of students in each group. So we are interested in understanding in a firm setup what is the output per unit of labor, right? And how is that changing? You can see that in the first round it keeps increasing, right? In the second round it declines, then increases, then declines again. So there are variations, right? The third thing which we are interested in is called marginal product, right? What is marginal product? Now I am also interested in understanding how does the total output change when I increase the worker by 1 unit, right? So what I am really interested in is understanding the change in the marginal product, right? So we, as a principle, the firm would like to keep producing or keep increasing the number of workers, or in this set the number of students, till you reach a point where the marginal product becomes 0. What does that mean? That means that if I keep increasing the workers anymore, the addition to total output will be 0, right? And after that, if I move forward, there will be actually reduction in the total output, or marginal product will become negative, right? So I have also plotted this, right? So this is the same table which was showing the total product, right? So you see there is an increase and then there is a decline. The last point is sort of an exception, and we'll see in a minute why, from the the theory behind it, or how it is supposed to move. Then you see this is the average product, right? So that it's also increases and then there is a decline and then there is an increase in the end. And this is marginal product, right? So the marginal product is plotted across this 0 horizontal line. The firms are trying to produce or increase the number of labor, keeping the capital constant, till you reach the point where the marginal product is 0, right? Where increasing the number of workers by 1 unit doesn't add anything to the total output, right? And then just one brief this thing on the actually the theory behind it, and then we can close and take questions. So this is the thing which I was trying to explain by using this paper plane experiment in a classroom is called something called laws of variable proportions, right? So I am interested in understanding what would happen to the total production or if I increase the labor while keeping the capital and other factors of production constant, right? And as a firm, I'm interested in producing at the most efficient point of production, right? So in this graph, you can see that the top graph is the total product. The second one is the marginal product, and then the third one is the average product, right? So you can see that in the first half till the first blue dotted vertical line, as the total product is increasing, it's increasing at an increasing rate, right? So the average product keeps increasing, the marginal product is also increasing, right? What does it mean? It means that as I increase the number of workers, right, my total output increase at an increasing rate, right? After that, the total output or total product is still increasing, but it's increasing at a decreasing rate, right? And you see that this point of intersection is where average product and marginal product are intersecting, is the point where my marginal product is highest, right? And then after some point, the total product will start falling, right? Or it will reach the maximum, and then it will start falling, and that is the point where your marginal product becomes zero, which means that if I increasing labor or by 1 unit doesn't add anything to the total output, or it's a zero contribution to the total output, and the firm will stop employing more labor at that point of time. So that is the most efficient point of production. I hope this was a bit clear. I'll close here now, but if you are interested in this, you can go and check out more on this. When we actually do it in class, this will be more interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiuli. I think interesting. I'm just trying to the session, but before we go to the next one, quick questions. I think there's one question I can see a hand raised by Tanush. Go ahead, Tanush. You can ask a question on. You can come on video, audio. That'll be great.
Sir, can you see me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
So my question was in the presentation, in the marginal product, the group one, the students, like 2 students in the group, the first group wasn't listed in the table. Why was that so? There were no values.
Yeah. So sorry, that was a mistake on my part. Yes, there should have been values in that. Yeah. No. So just a minute. Let me just check.
Where are you speaking from, Tanush? Which part?
Yeah, I will tell you.
I'm staying in Hyderabad.
Hi. Tanush, so I'll tell you why there are no values in that. So basically, when you're trying to measure the marginal product, right, that is the change in number of workers from something, right? So for the initial number of workers, which is 2, right, we have constructed the groups in a way that there are 2 laborers or 2 students in the first group, right? We can't calculate the marginal product for that group, because the marginal product can only be calculated when you're measuring the change. So when I go from 2 to 3, right, I measure the change, right? When I go from 3 to 4, I measure the change. So in this setup, they are listed as different firms, right? When you are trying to calculate the marginal product, you are assuming that the number of workers are changing for the same firm. So maybe I should have removed the listing of the groups in students. That would have been easier to understand. So we will never be able to calculate the marginal product for the first starting point, because it's a change. So for the first, let's say I start with 2 workers, I can't calculate the change for it because that's my initial point. I can only calculate it for the 3 workers and 4 workers.
If there was another group in which there was only 1 student, then the values from that, you could have calculated the values, marginal value for the second
Yes, yes. So I am calculating the marginal product. I'm assuming, let's assume that all these are part of one firm, right? So when I'm calculating the marginal product, what I do, I subtract the number of total output in the last firm from the other firm, right? So is that making sense, right? So the number of workers are increasing from 2 to 3. So the change in workers is 1, and the number of output is changing from something to something. So that is the difference. So the difference in output is divided by the difference in number of workers, and that ratio is
So
giving me the marginal product.
there's a formula for this.
Yes, so it's basically delta Q, which is the change in output, divided by delta L, which is the change in labor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great.
Yeah, but thanks for the question. Yeah.
Which class are you in, Tanush?
Sir, I'm 10.
So you're starting 10th grade. Great. And you are learning economics. Did you take economics as a subject to study?
Yes, sir.
Superb. Right. If there are no more questions, I think then we should go to the
One in the chat
next
box.
segment. Is there any chat box? Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yes, there's one in the
Chat,
chat
yeah.
box. So I'll take this one.
You just read the questions also.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Vrishak is asking the difference between ownership holding and operational holding. It's fairly simple but very crucial. So if you say, let's take an example. If you own, say, 2 acres of land, that is your ownership holding. If you rent or hire or rent in another acre of land, so you add that to your 2 acres, and now you're cultivating 3 acres. So that becomes your operational holding. So 3 acres is your operational holding. So it is your own land plus the land that you have rented in. And suppose you had 2 acres of land and you did not want to cultivate 1 acre and only wanted to cultivate 1 acre. In this case, your operational holding becomes the 1 acre that you're cultivating. Your ownership holding remains 2 acres. I hope this answers your question.
Right. Okay. I think on that note, in the interest of time, I think we'll take more questions later. If there are more questions, you can always ask in the chat, or after Avinash's segment, I think we will have more time.
Yeah.
So, Avinash, if you could, I've just made you a host so that you can share the screen if you have PPT to share. Let's see, look for Avinash. Avinash, if you could take stage now. Yes, thank you. 1 second, I just. There are still questions coming on the chat, Sunit, if you could, one of you could answer, or we answer it towards the end. But now we are moving to the second segment, which we are calling understanding budgets. How is it made and how does it impact us, right? The society, the public. That's the ideas that Avinash will explore. Yeah, it's come up, Avinash. Thank you. If you could put that in slideshow mode, maybe better also. Perfect. Perfect.
Hello.
Perfect.
Hi. Am I audible?
Very clear. Very clear.
Okay, okay. So basically, Understanding budget. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Avinash Tripathi. I am part of economics group at Premji University Bhopal campus. And today I am going to talk about basically about union budget, how what exactly a budget is, how it is presented to the parliament, how it is passed, and what function exactly it serves. Okay, so basically comes every February. You must have seen quite a frenzy around budget presentation. So if you are following newspapers, if you are following TV, then you must have seen lots of discussion around union budgets. You must have seen the budget being presented by the finance minister. You must have seen lots of discussion around it. Okay, so today I am sort of going to talk about those things, why exactly budget matters, what exactly it is about, and why you should bother about it, why you should be concerned about budget, why you should follow it, not just as a student of economics, but as a citizen who is interested in the social political affairs around you. Okay, so basically, what is a budget? So this is going to be the basic outline of my talk. First of all, I'm going to talk about what is a budget, why it is important. Secondly, I'm going to give you a very brief snapshot of how it is prepared and how it is passed. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about how does it impact the life of a common person. Okay. So basically, these are the 3 points I'm going to cover in this talk. And I should tell you that basically this entire process, it is far too complex to cover in about 13 minutes. Basically, I can teach you an entire semester basically elaborating on these 3 points. So I am necessarily going to be a bit brief. So, okay. So first of all, what is a budget? Okay. So, as you know, government, every government has to provide certain functions. It has to provide certain services. Okay, so for example, the government has to sort of ensure the external and internal security of a country. So they need to have an army, they need to have a police force, they need to have lots of paraphernalia. They also have to provide a number of social services, like they have to provide education, quality health, and employment, and a number of things, basically social security. So, in order to meet the expenses for those things, they also have to mobilize resources. Okay, so basically, they have to impose certain taxes on citizens. Now, what exactly is the tax? So, technically, the definition of a tax in public finance is twofold. A tax is supposed to have two characteristics. First of all, a tax is a compulsory levy. Okay, so what is a compulsory levy? Compulsory levy is something that is not voluntary. Okay, so for example, if you are gifting something someone, that is voluntary. It is depends on your whether you are interested in gifting or not. uh, if you are sort of transferring something voluntarily to other person, that is not a tax. But whenever you are paying tax, there is an element of compulsion involved. Okay, so when you are paying, for example, income tax or VAT or any other tax, if you are falling in the bracket where you have to pay your taxes, then you have no other option, you have to pay it. So there is an element of compulsion involved. The second thing is that a tax, by definition, has got no quid pro quo. Okay, so what is a quid pro quo? Quid pro quo is a kind of payment that is made in anticipation of something else. Okay, so for example, let us say I am going to buy this pen. Okay, I am making some payment to the shopkeeper, and shopkeeper is going to give me this particular pen. So this pen is going to be my quid pro quo for the payment I am making. A tax doesn't work like that. So whenever you are making a payment, government does not promise, government does not guarantee anything in return. There is no quid pro involved. Okay, so that is something called tax. Number one, it has got to be compulsory, and number two, there is no quid pro quo involved in making a tax payment. Okay, Now, once you think about it, this power of imposing taxes and ability to sort of spend that money, it is a very powerful thing. Okay, and our constitution provides a number of mechanisms to sort of control this entire process. Okay, and uh, first of all, before I elaborate on this, I am going to talk a little bit about the structure of our government. Okay, so basically the government, if you have done your civics in class 10th, you must be knowing that government consists of different branches. Okay, so you have something called legislature, you have something called executive, and you have something called judiciary. These are three supposedly independent branches within the government. Okay, now what is legislature? Legislature is basically your parliament. Okay, so the parliament consists of different houses. You have the lower house called a House of People or Lok Sabha. You have an upper house called House of States or Rajya Sabha. And technically, president is also part of the parliament. Okay, so basically, your parliament or legislature, it consists of the president. It consists of uh, the Lok Sabha, and it consists of Rajya Sabha. Secondly, you have executive. The executive is headed by the by council of minister, who is headed by, and that is headed by the prime minister. Okay, so you have a council of minister that consists of prime minister, minister of finance, minister of external affairs, minister of commerce, a number of ministers. Those ministers, they supervise on something called departments. Okay, so the departments, they are headed by some by an official called secretary. Okay, so that is your executive. It is headed by the prime minister, council of minister, and those council of ministers, they supervise on different departments, and departments are headed by secretaries. Now, there is one crucial thing to understand here. The public money, whenever you are imposing any tax, whenever you are collecting any money, and whenever you are spending that, the entire power of all those financial powers, they reside in parliament. Okay, so in some sense, parliament, according to the Indian constitution, parliament is the owner of the public purse. But in reality, what happens that the actual expenditure, the annual spending, it has to be made by the executive. It has to be made by the different ministers, different departments. Okay, so because the public purse is owned by the parliament and the actual expenditure is being made by the executive, there has to be some way of getting the authorization from the parliament. Okay, so basically, what happens that every year executive comes to the parliament and says that, look, I have a number of needs. I have to pay the government officials. I have to pay for NREGA. I have to pay for the National Rural Health Mission. I have a number of programs, and I need money in order to run those programs. So please sanction me, please permit me, please allow me to sort of get withdraw money from the treasury and allow it to disburse it to spend it for the specific purpose. Okay, so this entire exercise of legislative authorization of the government expenditure, that is known as budget. Okay, so let me repeat once again. You have a number of branches within the government: legislature, number two, executive, number three, judiciary, the public purse, the power to impose taxes, and the power to spend, to authorize spending, that belongs to the parliament. Number one point. Number two, the actual expenditure is made by the executive, different ministries, different departments. Number two, and before they can actually make that expenditure, they need to get permission, they need to get authorization, they need to get uh, permission from the legislature. And this entire process is known as budget, and it is repeated every year before the financial year, before the fiscal year starts. I hope I'm making myself clear. So this is the broader idea why you have a budget. Uh, this ritual is repeated every year. Okay, So basically, budget is a parliamentary procedure through which the permission to levy taxes and authorize expenditure is granted. Okay. Uh, Once we have a basic understanding of what budget is about, let us have a look at the process, how exactly it is done. So basically, the budget is presented by the finance minister in the parliament, usually on the first February of each year. Okay. So right now, the convention earlier it used to be towards the end of the February, but a few years ago this budget presentation it was moved to February 1st. So every February on the first uh, February you have this presentation. So finance minister uh, goes to the parliament and lays down a number of proposals that look for the coming years we have to impose certain taxes. That is number one. And once we are getting whatever proceeds we are getting, we need to spend on such and such accounting head. Okay. So this ritual is sort of repeated every year. On the eve of the budget presentation, a panoramic view of the economy is presented in an official document called the economic survey. Okay, so let us say that budget is going to be presented tomorrow. So one day before the budget is presented, uh, a very important economic document called the economic survey is presented to the parliament. And the economic survey basically it looks at the economic performance of the entire economy for the previous year. Okay, so for example, if your budget is being presented for the year 2024, then economic survey is going to cover the performance of the economy for the entire 2023. Okay, so we are going to, it is going to look at, for example, what was the GDP growth, what was the fiscal deficit, what was the trade deficit, what was the inflation, and a number of things they are basically covered in the economic survey. So basically the economic survey it sets the stage for the presentation of budget. Okay. And the actual preparation of the budget starts a couple of months before the budget presentation. So basically, what happens a couple of months before the budget is actually presented. So let us say that budget is going to be presented in February. So in November or December, this budget presentation preparation actually starts. So expenditure proposals they are sought from the different ministries, how much you are going to spend, and they are sort of combined into a single proposal so that it can be forwarded to the parliament. So this entire process starts a couple of months before the actual budget is presented. After budget presented, the budget proposals are discussed in detail by the parliament and most of the proposals are voted and passed. Okay, so basically, you know, as I told you, that basically the government of India, the basic unit of administration is something called department. Okay, so every department comes out with something called demand for grant. The demand for grant for a particular department, it is going to tell you that how much money we need. We need this much money for paying salary. We need this much money for running government schemes. We need this much money for building new infrastructure and so on and so forth. So all the heads, they are detailed in the demand for grant. And the demand for grant they are presented for each department individually. Okay, and that is presented to the parliament. Okay, and then they are discussed by the parliament and eventually they are passed. Okay, usually the convention is that if the budget has to pass in the parliament. There is no other way around because the convention is that if the budget proposals are defeated, if even a single grant fails to clear the parliament, then by convention, the government of the day has to resign. Okay, so it is a very, very important thing for, it is a very, very important for the government of the day to get the budget passed. So far, there has been no situation in India, at least, where the budget failed to pass in the parliament. Okay, so okay, So after budget presentation, the budget proposals are discussed in detail by the parliament, and most of the proposals are voted and passed. As I told you, that parliament has two houses in India. There is Lok Sabha or House of the People, and Rajya Sabha, House of the State. Basically, budget proposals flow through both the houses. They move through both the houses, but in terms of actual approval power, Lok Sabha is much more powerful. Okay, so basically, the idea is that only Lok Sabha is supposed to sort of give legislative authorization. Rajya Sabha at most can suggest some modifications. Okay, so they can return certain proposals whether those suggestions they are going to be accepted by the Lok Sabha or not. That is not mandatory. That is not obligatory. So basically, the budget uh, process is concerned, the Lok Sabha is extremely important. It is much more powerful than Rajya Sabha. And okay, so basically, this is a very brief synopsis of the budget process. Okay, so basically, what happens that union budget is presented. Okay, and then uh, the budget is discussed in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Okay, and after a brief discussion on the union budget, then House adjourns for a few weeks. Okay, so what happens in the meanwhile? The budget goes to something called standing committees. Okay, so they are for different departments. There are specific standing committees of parliament, and those committees scrutinize the budget proposals in detail, and they say that look, this proposal makes sense, this proposal doesn't make sense, and then it comes back to the parliament for detailed discussion. And this uh, and the budget proposals are discussed in details. Okay, now at this point, the different demand for grants, they are separated into categories. Okay, every year some demand for grants are selected for detailed scrutiny. Okay, so parliament is going to debate them, discuss them very thoroughly, and the other demand for grants, because the time is not sufficient, usually they are passed without much discussion. Okay, so those demand for grants, the technical term is called guillotine. Okay, so you have certain demand for grants which are discussed extensively by the parliament, and there are certain demand for grants which are not discussed thoroughly. They are just passed because of the shortage of time, because of the time constraints. They are just passed, they are guillotined. Okay, and finally, once the demand for grants for the different departments are passed, they are consolidated into a single appropriation bill, and then appropriation bill is passed. Okay, so once the appropriation bill is passed, it is sent for approval to the president, and then once president signs it, the budget is supposed to be passed. So this is the process. Finance minister presents the budget in the parliament. The budget consists of different kind of demands for grants. Uh, After a brief discussion, those demand for grants, they go to something called standing committees. Standing committees scrutinize the budget, and then it comes back for the detailed discussion to the parliament. Parliament discusses it. The individual demand for grants are discussed and passed, and finally everything is consolidated into an appropriation bill, and that is cleared. Okay, so this is how the entire budget process works. uh, Now, once budget has been passed, once budget has been cleared, the government is authorized to spend money. Now, this authorization is not absolute; it is not unconditional. Okay, so basically, this authorization is for a specific purpose and for a specific time period. Okay, so basically, the parliament says that look, you have got this much money, but you can spend it only on this particular head, only on this particular service, number one, and this authorization has to be, and it has to be spent within this financial year only. So if you are not able to spend it within this particular year, then the amount is going to lapse. You will have to once again come to us and seek approval. Okay, So this particular authorization, this legislative authorization is supposed to be given for a specific purpose and for a specific time frame. Now, how do you ensure that this particular condition is met in practice? How do you ensure that the money is being spent only for the purpose it was given approval for? Now comes another official who is known as the Controller General of India. Okay, so this Controller of General of India, or CAG, he looks at the utilization of funds, and the CAG basically, if he finds there was any discrepancy, there was anything problematic, there is a CAG report that is presented annually to the Parliament, and basically it is the responsibility of the CAG to ensure that the money is actually spent in the way it was authorized initially. Okay, and because of the enormous role played by the CAG, or the Controller and Auditor General of India, CAG is known as uh, guardian of the public purse. Okay, so basically it is so important that the Constitution of India provides a number of powers and privileges to the CAG. Basically, he is considered to be at par with Supreme Court judge in terms of pay, in terms of perquisite, in terms of security of job. Basically, CAG is considered to be equivalent to a Supreme Court judge. It is a very important post, and CAG is also known as the guardian of the public purse. Okay. Now, there may be some situations, okay, where due to unforeseen contingency, or for something that you did not plan for, there was an expenditure. Okay, so for example, let us say that budget was passed for the year 2020, and then within the year you had COVID. Okay, so the fact that we are going to have a pandemic, it could not have been foreseen at the point where when the budget was presented. Now you have to spend some money you could not have foreseen it. Okay, so you need to spend. The government has to spend beyond the money that was sanctioned, that was authorized by the parliament. Okay, now what do you do? Uh, in such situation where due to some unforeseen contingency, the government has to overspend its limit, then the process is that they will have to come back to the parliament and get the excess amount approved once again. Okay, so this entire thing, it is called supplementary grant. Okay, so the government says that, look, you gave me, let us say, on a particular head, you approved 5,000 crores, but due to some unforeseen contingency, due to some some exigency, I actually spent 10,000 crore. So I have to get uh, approval for the excess 5,000 once again. Okay, so this particular process, it is known as supplementary grant. Okay, and then there are certain situations where the government cannot present a budget for the entire year. What are those situations? Okay, so one situation could be an election year. Okay, so let us say this is an election year. Now, for this particular year, there will be two governments. There will be one government before the election is done, and there will be another government after the election is completed. Now, the government, because there are going to be two different governments in a single financial year, it is not considered proper, it is not considered legitimate for the government before the election to present a budget for the entire year. Okay, so what happens? They pass something called interim budget. What is an interim budget? An interim budget deals with a certain part of the financial year. Okay, so basically, what happened this year? Finance minister came to the parliament and said that, look, this year we are going to have an election. We cannot pass a budget for the entire year. So I am going to present an interim budget for the next 4 5 months till the elections are concluded. And once elections are concluded, the new government is formed. the new finance minister is going to come, and the new finance minister is going to present the actual budget. Okay, so this interim budget basically, by convention, it deals with spending proposals only. Okay, now as I told you, basically a normal budget, it has two things: it has taxation proposals and it has expenditure proposals. But an interim budget consists of expenditure proposals only. Okay, so that is one difference. Okay, so by conventions, interim budgets, they do not impose any taxes. Okay, uh, okay, okay. So basically, we covered number one, what is a budget and how it is passed, what is the process. Okay, now finally, I'm going to have a look at how does the budget impact the life of a common person. Okay, so why should you bother? Okay, not merely as an economics student, but as a well-informed citizen, how should you bother about, why should you bother about budget? Okay, so basically a budget uh, impacts the life of a common person in a number of ways. Okay, so first of all, it impacts by setting out the expenditure priorities of a government. Okay, so let us say that government is going to spend on a number of heads. They are spending on defense, classic public goods like defense, like justice, like maintenance of law and order. Okay, all of those things require resources. They have to spend on different kind of social services like providing education, providing health, providing social security, providing uh, employment and different kind of social services. They also have to provide a number of economic services. Okay, so for example, government has to build roads. They have to build a number of infrastructure projects. Okay, so how exactly, what are the priorities of the government, whether they are going to prioritize one sector over the other, that is determined by your budget. Okay, so how much money you are going to uh, spend, and basically, so this expenditure budget, it sort of tells you about that. And I should tell you one thing: when you actually look at uh, the speeches made by the politicians, we care a lot about health, we care a lot about education, we care a lot about women empowerment. One, it is a good idea to always correlate it with their budget priorities. Okay, because quite often there is often a divergence. Okay, so your politician, your minister, they are going to, in fact, there is quite a lot of divergence between the budget speech and the actual budget proposals. Okay, so they are going to say that we care a lot about education, we care a lot about, let us say, health. But when you actually look at the allocations for those services, does not sort of vindicate their priorities. Okay, so that is one thing. The second thing is, budget also contains different kind of taxation proposals. Okay, so how much income tax you are going to pay, how much rebate in your income tax you are going to get, how much deduction you are going to get, what will be, uh, okay. So all those things, let us say, how much indirect tax you are going to pay, let us say custom duty or excise duty on different kind of goods. All those things, they are determined by the taxation proposals contained in the budget. Okay, so that is the second way a budget impacts you. It contains the taxation proposals that as a tax paying citizens you are supposed to abide by. Okay, and finally, the fiscal policy affects the macroeconomic environment in different ways. Okay, so this is something I cannot cover here. I will have to actually uh, teach you a macroeconomic theory class before I can uh, tell you the entire reasoning, but the idea is that whether government is running deficit, whether government is running a fiscal deficit, whether they are running a fiscal surplus, it is going to play a very important role in the macroeconomic management of the country. Okay, so whether you are having a recession, whether you are having an inflation, whether you are having unemployment, whether you are having a reasonable level of employment, whether you are having, let us say, trade deficit, whether you are not having, you are having a trade surplus, your fiscal deficit is a very important variable that determines all those macroeconomic parameters. And all those macroeconomic parameters, they affect you as a citizen. Okay, so that is the third way a budget is going to affect you. It is going to sort of create the economic environment, macroeconomic environment, that will be responsible for inflation, that will be responsible for the level of employment, unemployment, trade deficit, and a number of things. Okay, and all those things eventually matter to you as a citizen, as an individual, and as a student of economics. Okay, so with this, I think I am going to conclude this talk, and we covered to sort of uh, give you a recap. We covered number one, what is budget, number two, how it is passed, number three, how it is going to impact you as a common citizen. I think I will stop here.
Thank you, Avinash. I think there are any quick questions we should take now. Uh, I did see somebody had raised the hand. Still there? No, I think they've lowered the hand now. There's a question by Shruti asking if inflation is it big, what is the relationship between inflation and budget? So I think it's a very broad question. That's one question I can see. Others, any other questions before we move to the next session? Oh, we are getting into legalities of that now. So well, they are lawmakers, right? The people who are the Lok Sabha, they are lawmakers. So I think the question is, I don't know the answer to this. I don't know because the budget or part of it be challenged in the Supreme Court or anywhere else. But what are you challenging? I think the challenging has to be if it is there is a what do you say deterrent to the constitutional values, or if it is not abiding to the rights of citizens. So I'm not really fully sure what is your
Okay,
question.
so
Yeah.
hello.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, so the first question is about the relation of inflation and budget. Okay, so basically the idea is, let us say that government is running a fiscal deficit. Okay, so they are spending more than they are collecting taxes. Okay, now how it is going to be financed? One way of financing it is called monetization of budget. Okay, so basically you are printing money in order to finance your budget deficit, and whenever you are printing money in order to finance your budget, that is going to have some implication for the inflation. Okay, so that is how your budget is related to inflation management. So if you are having a fiscal management, and if you are using money printing in order to finance your budget deficit, then it is going to have some implication for the inflation. Okay, I hope I have answered you. The second question is, the annual financial statement consists of the use of consolidated fund of India and reserve funds as well. Are these statements made during the budget presentation or the eve of the budget presentation in the economic survey? My next question, a financial year runs from 1st April to the 31st March. Why is the budget presentation done on the 1st February and not 31st March? My last question, are supplementary grants taken from the contingency funds of India? Okay, so basically, you are asking a very detailed questions. So basically, the government treasury, it consists of three things. So you have something called consolidated fund of India, you have something called public accounts, and you have something called contingency fund. Okay. Now, as far as the annual financial statements are concerned, that is basically just a technical legal name for the budget. Okay. So annual financial statement is basically budget. It is just in popular parlance, in popular vocabulary, what we call budget. It is called legally annual financial statement. Okay, so there is basically not much of a difference between the two. And secondly, a financial year runs from 1st April to 31st March. Basically, this entire spending, this entire uh, taxation proposal, they come into operation with effect from the 1st April. Okay, so basically, before you actually start spending, you have to get authorization from the legislature. That is why this entire exercise has to start a couple of months before. Okay, because by the time you reach the 1st April, the entire authorization process, it has to be completed. Otherwise, government won't be able to spend even a single rupee. Okay, so given all those things, people have decided that the February 1st is the best time to start this budget presentation thing. Can the budget or any part of it can be challenged in Supreme Court? Basically, no. Okay. So basically, there is separation of power and the budget making power, the power to approve certain expenditure that belongs to the parliament. And when the parliament has said, basically Lok Sabha has said that you have such and such money available, then it cannot be challenged. Okay. Will you give some specific examples in the election year the budget will impact the common people? There are a number of schemes. For example, how much allocation is there for Narega? How much allocation there is for the national, let us say, health mission? Let us say how much expenditure is available, how much amount is available for education. All those things they are going to affect common man only, isn't it?
Right. In the
What is
midst
the
of
difference between the Council of Ministers and Cabinet Minister? Okay, so basically, Cabinet Council of Minister consists of Cabinet Ministers plus Minister for State. Okay, so Cabinet is a subset of Council of Ministers. Okay,
Okay, I think we have kind of answered all the questions. Thanks, Avinash. I think, as you said, you kind of what you would have taught in a full semester, you kind of brought into all these slides and gave a quick snapshot for high school students. And I'm sure when the budget comes out after the new government comes into play, right, in the month of June. I'm sure they will look at it much more closely. And personally, I try to look how much are we spending on education. That's what I try to look personally. Are we spending more money on buying arms and ammunition? Much more than what we should spend on education, right? So on that note, I'm going to invite my colleague. We're not taking a break, unfortunately, but if you take a break, the entire rhythm of the session would go. Avinash, if you could stop sharing, I would request Sharib to come on screen and he can set it up. And while if you could stop sharing, or Sharib, we can try sharing. If you have a PPT, you can come on video as well. Oh, you are.
Yes, hi, hi.
Yes, you are there. Oh, thank you. Yes. So if once you
So
start sharing, this
don't
sharing will
share
go.
unless Avinash stops sharing.
You can, I think. I think it can override. No, you're not able to.
Can I? Okay, let me try. Let me try.
No. So while you're doing, for others who are on the call, in the order they spoke, right? Sunit, Shiuli, and Avinash. Uh,
Hmm.
they teach the BA Economics program at Azim Premji University. And you got a quick snapshot of how we look at economics. And Sharif is going to teach. We have a program called BA in Social Science, which is offered as a major, and also it's also as part of the new 4-year curriculum. It can be also done as a minor. So you could do economics with social science as a minor, or social science major with economics as a minor. So, but today's I'm sure he's not going to talk about our program, but yeah, the joys of doing social science. Yeah. Thanks. Over to you, Shri. And I was telling somebody that we should do this probably in a lot of schools across the country, wherein for some reason science and maths is somewhere there. And social science, it's kind of neglected, ignored in school. But over
Yes.
to you, over to you, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Rajgopal, and thank you, Sadaf, for inviting me to do this. Um, can I ask? See, I am not planning to use the PPT constantly. This is just a check test if the PPT is working.
It
Uh,
is.
I would want to interact more as we go on in the next half an hour. So can I ask few of the volunteers if they can switch on their cameras, because I want to look at their faces, their expressions as we talk. Uh, yes. Thank you, Tanush. So yeah, some more volunteer and we are good to go. Okay. So as I told you, I'll just keep on sharing and stop sharing the PPT. So I'll begin with a question. The question is, what is the difference between the primitive societies and the modern ones? So many of you would be aware of largely what is the difference. So the general answer that would come would be that primitive societies are based on myth, they're based on emotions, whereas the modern societies are based on scientific knowledge. Okay. Now, the basis of scientific knowledge, we all know, and since most of you do science and are interested in science, we know that the basis of scientific knowledge is curiosity. Okay. So what really is curiosity? We have a rough sense of what curiosity is. I just want to show a small video of what curiosity is. Okay. I hope it works. Just... What is time? That matter. Space. The goal of scientific pursuit should not merely be to make use of the world. It should be to understand it fundamentally, no matter what use it might be. The smallest molecule to the largest galaxy. Every question must have a definable answer, and, well, I intend to find those answers. Okay, so the curiosity in science is always about knowing what we don't know, explaining what can be explained, no matter it's of use right now or not. It may be of use for future, but we must keep knowing, isn't it? We must keep exploring. And while we are doing that, we certainly find that a lot of time we are highlighting the fallacies of the sensory organs, the senses. Think about the discoveries of Copernicus, for instance. What did Copernicus do? When he said that the sun is at the center of the universe, it's not the earth, from the geocentric model of the universe to a heliocentric model. It was contesting what we were looking every day. People were seeing that, okay, the sun is rising in the east and setting in the west. So we were seeing sun moving from one place to the other, isn't it? But in the scientific inquiry, it told us that no, whatever we see through our sensory organs, whatever we observe through our sensory organs may not be true, isn't it? And there begins the curiosity, that there has to be a method, a way in which we should come closer to the reality. And that reality, science always has this space, that reality is not really absolute. So some other day, some other person might come and prove that, okay, Copernicus, Galileo, every other person who thought that sun was at the center of the universe is wrong. There's always this space to do so. That's what scientific temper is, that there is no finality to truth. You can always keep on searching, keep on exploring, whether you use it right now or not, isn't it? So if we say some discipline like social science, which bases itself on the model of science, in the very same way that natural sciences describes the processes of nature, social sciences must describe the human societies, the processes, the norms of human societies. What would be the curiosity of the social science? The curiosity of social science would be that why do social rules, the norms, processes, they exist? Even if when we see that most of them are absurd, we do not make any sense of why they exist, isn't it? But they keep on existing. They keep on reoccurring. So the question for us would be, on one, to find why do they exist, in what ways do they exist, and if they are reoccurring, they are repeating itself, what are the factors behind that make them repeat themselves, and what are the forces behind. So some of the time we find that, okay, think of any example where people are forced to behave in a particular way. And a very comfortable idea that we get from social science is the idea of socialization, isn't it? Where anyone is trained, is socialized since the childhood to behave in a particular way. And we do not ever realize the forces of society behind what we are doing, isn't it? Why we are repeating the social norms, for instance. So from the position of curiosity that begins in the domain of science to the curiosity that comes to social sciences, we also realize another thing, and that is the decline of curiosity. There's a global decline of curiosity, especially in the students. So listen to what Carl Sagan has to speak.
Here's my experience. My experience is you go talk to kindergarten kids or first grade kids, you find a class full of science enthusiasts. Um, and they ask deep questions. Um, what is a dream? Why do we have toes? Why is the moon round? What's the birthday of the world? Why is grass green? These are profound, important questions. They just bubble right out of them. You go and talk to 12th grade students, and there's none of it. They become leaden and curious. Something terrible has happened between kindergarten and 12th grade, and it's not just puberty.
So this idea that there is a decline from the kindergarten to the 12th graders, the curiosity declines. Why does it happen? And when I'm thinking why does it happen is because, again, a drawback that we kind of borrow from scientific reasoning itself. But once science proves something, we take it as a finality, we take it as a truth, and we stop questioning it. So now from our part, we need to expand our horizon and make the question much more bigger, vaster, try to explore more of the areas. So for instance, think of it. As I began my discussion, that was the difference between primitive and the modern societies, that primitive societies bases themselves on myths. So can we really have scientific explanation of myths? And I'll tell you one story, a myth from Western Canada. It's a myth about the skate in the south wind. Okay. So this is the image of the skate on your screen. If this is a breed of species of fish, if you, many of you, if you've not seen, they are very huge in size. So the story is that this is the time before the coming of the mankind, where there are not really man and animals, they are half man, half animals, or human, animal, animal, humans. And in that time, the south wind is blowing every day, which is making the mankind difficult to do anything, to go fishing, to collect shells in the shores. It's difficult for them. So then they decide that they must capture the south wind. And Skate is very much instrumental. He leads the way. They capture the south wind and liberate the south wind only on the promise that south wind will not blow every day. It will blow only on few days of the year, or let's say one day out of the 2 days. Okay. Now we know that this is not a true story. Okay. This is a mythical story. But why south wind? Why Skate? This is a question which needs a scientific explanation. Okay. So if you go deeper into the how the structure of a skate is, you see this is huge flat fish. Okay. So it appears very huge and so very easy to kill. One can shot an arrow and kill the skate. But when the skate is on from this, you see skate from this side, it becomes very easier to kill the skate because it's huge, flat. But the moment skate turns, then it's not very easy to kill the skate. So if some enemy is approaching the skate is always giving a response either in yes or no. If it's flat, right from this position, you can kill it. If it is from this position, you cannot kill it. Okay, this is the binary. So the question, the problem of the myth is that the south wind is blowing every day. The solution to it is either the south wind has to blow or not, or if one day out of 2 days, so one day it is blowing, yes, one day it is not blowing, no, isn't it? Very much the state gives the response, yes and no. And then we realize that, think of this computer, the cybernetics, it also works on the same binary of 0, 1, of yes and no, isn't it? So the problem to the myth, or the problem that was highlighted in the myth, the response was only coming in the form of yes and no, and the structure of skate was the only possibility in the myth that gives us that situation of yes and no. So we realize that the use of skate in the myth is not really absurd. It has a meaning to it. And we get to the meaning only when we try to interpret it scientifically after the coming of cybernetics, for instance, after the coming of computer science, isn't it? On the other hand, then we have another notion, which is that science produces what is real, what is truth. My question is, do science produce unreal, the absurd? And I'll give you another example. Think of these three shapes: the triangle, the real or perfect triangle, the perfect circle, and the perfect line. We do not have anything in nature which is perfect triangle, perfect circle, or perfect line. How have we reached here? And this is the old debate in Greek philosophy, that how have we reached to the perfect triangle, perfect circle, and perfect line? Because nature doesn't give us. There is no reality of perfect circle, perfect triangle, perfect line, isn't it? So then we realize, at the same time, while we are realizing that science can produce what is absurd, we also realize that there are disorders in reality, and disorder is the normal. What we see as perfect is not really real, is not normal. The reality is actually the disorder. Okay. So once we realize that disorder, there is no perfect triangle, let's say, and then there are things which look triangular, we imagine the perfect triangle. There are things which look circular, we imagine a perfect circle. In the same way, there are no perfect societies. We imagine only the perfect societies, isn't it? By looking at a number of societies. And at the same time, we have this idea that, okay, if there are no perfect societies, so the disorder, the imperfect societies is the normal, isn't it? What does it give us once we accept this, that, okay, imperfections are normal? It certainly makes us much more humble. It makes us much more civil. We accept the differences, isn't it? So on one hand, there are two processes. One is the process of homogenization. We're trying to make societies homogeneous. But the moment we start this process of homogenization, we realize that more and more distinctions come up. There are more differences which arrives, isn't it? So in that situation, we are then forced to think that, okay, homogenization of perfections may not be the real way in which we should take human societies forward, isn't it? So this humility of accepting the imperfection comes from a position where we realize our own worth, the individual's worth in whatever we are participating. So are we participating in these disorders individually? Because there is a huge wave of thinking that the problems are individual problems, and therefore we must seek the individual solutions. And then we realize that no, what happens if everyone tries to resolve the problem individually? At some point, to some extent, we'll be able to do that, but will it give us a society which becomes perfect? And it also demands that we realize what the problems really are. So it comes from an awareness where we see that we are participating in something larger than us, which we call as systems, social systems, for instance. Okay. And social systems are so huge that even if we try to change it from the individual position, we are not able to change it. Okay. But do social systems change? I'll come to that in a while. So we are participating in the social systems. We are not part of it. And I make this distinction, sorry, that we are participating in the social system. What is the difference between it? Participating in the social system and being part of the social system. So participating means that there are positions in the system. Think of various positions. When you are in your home, you are a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, isn't it? Or whatever positions you are in the family. But when you go to school, you are not carrying the same position. You are not a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter at school, isn't it? You are a student in relation to what the school is, in relation to, let's say, your teacher, in relation to the principal, in relation to the director and other people, other positions in the school, isn't it? So you cannot carry one position of one system to another system. It doesn't make any sense for us, isn't it? And then you realize that, okay, the family can very well work without the individual, because individuals are merely participating in that system. So you can participate in the school as a student, you can participate in the school as a prefect, let's say, isn't it? But the position of the prefect is external to the individual, isn't it? If I am not the prefect, somebody else is prefect, and the role of the prefect is being played by someone else. If I get to be the prefect, okay, so I am playing that role, isn't it? Well, what does it mean playing that role? I'm merely participating in the system, isn't it? So once we realize that we are participating in the system and not part of the system, so system, it tells us that we must always choose a path of least resistance. This is something which system tells us. So whichever positions you are in, system tells us what is a good behavior about it, isn't it? We kind of differentiate between what is a can, what is a shall, and what is a must behavior. But let's keep it simple. What is a good behavior? Who is a good prefect? Who is a good son? Who is a good father? Isn't it? Who is a good daughter, good sister? All such things, isn't it? So if you play by the rule, then you do not resist at all. This is the path of least resistance, and everyone is acknowledging your participation, that whatever you are doing is good. But is it what we really need? Because then we know that systems are not really fixed entities. The rules are not fixed. We know the schools are not the building, the classrooms, the library, the playground, or whatever you can think of, isn't it? Schools are made up of people, and there are no repetition as such. So there are no two schools which are entirely similar, isn't it? So they can make entirely same building, they can make entirely same library, same playground. Even then, we won't say that these two schools are same. Why? because then they consist of different people and people behave differently. So path of least resistance may not be the only path that people are following. So what other paths do we have? The opposite of it, let's say the path of greater resistance, isn't it? How do we come to that path? And I want to connect this question to the larger question of the scientific inquiry. So if you have heard of Immanuel Kant, I am sure many of you have heard of his name. Immanuel Kant is writing an essay in 1784. It's called What is Enlightenment? Isn't it? The first sentence of Enlightenment, What is Enlightenment? Essay says that it is the emergence from the self-imposed immaturity. Okay, what does it mean? It means that the immaturity is inherent, is given, isn't it? And it is self-imposed. We all take that. Whatever the system gives us, the path of least resistance, we take that. We behave accordingly. But then this is not the motto of enlightenment. In the same essay, there's a German word which he uses, is sapere ode. Okay. The sapere ode is the courage to know. So what enlightenment brought us is that courage, the curiosity to know what we are, who we are, why we are the way we are, why processes are the way they are, how are we participating, how should we participate, isn't it? And if you are aware of many of such questions, it certainly give us an option of how do we choose, or the ways we choose to participate in the system. It gives us an option. So think about it. We are living in a world which is marred by a number of evils, a number of stereotypes, isn't it? We are a society which is casteist, we are a society which is classist, we are a society which is misogynist, isn't it? And think of any jokes or comedy show, we are laughing on those jokes. I can think of, let's say, the Kapil Sharma show, which is one of the very famous Hindi shows on Indian television, isn't it? What is common in every episode of Kapil Sharma show? There is someone who is a cross-dresser. There is someone who is an overweight person. And then a number of jokes on the cross-dresser person or the overweight person. At this point, we are laughing at those jokes. But when we realize that, okay, this is not how I am going to participate in this system. So I am not laughing on those jokes, isn't it? I choose how to participate in the system. And how do I make that choice? Only through the informed position. Only when I realize that what does it mean to be a cross-dresser in a society which is, let's say, heteronormative, which is homophobic, or it can be anything, which is misogynist, isn't it? What does it mean to be a person from the lower caste in a society which is casteist, which has caste discrimination, caste humiliation, caste violence, or whatever, isn't it? Or what does it mean to be an upper caste in the caste-ridden society? Because the system which proposes the paths of least resistance, it always proposes that, okay, take things as normative. So an upper caste humiliating a lower caste is perfectly normal, isn't it? This is what the system teaches us. But the moment you choose not to do the way they are telling you to do and opt for a path of greater resistance, that's where you're making an informed choice, isn't it? So social science, I'm just trying to, how much time do I have? Okay, do I have? Okay, thanks. So social science, when it claims that it is going to study society from in the similar way that sciences does, we also realize that it is such an impossible obligation. We cannot do so, because then our subjectivities become a huge hindrance in such an inquiry. We are always blinded by our positions, and therefore reflexivity, being aware of our position, becomes very important, isn't it? So it gives us a different kind of sensibility, making us realize that, okay, we cannot really claim to be knowing all kinds of truth or all kinds of reality. But then knowing the reality is a desire, an aspiration. How do we do that? Okay, so bring multiple experiences together, isn't it? So your experience, my experience, Rajagopal's experience, Tanusha's experience, Janavi's experience, everyone's experience, we should bring on the table and say, okay, so what the experiences are, what do we know about the experiences? Bring all the imperfect circles, all the imperfect triangles together and try to create a perfect triangle, a perfect circle. Isn't it? This is what we are trying to do. So the best possible way to do it is through the participatory modes of teaching learning, or democratic modes and democratic modes of teaching learning, isn't it? So what social sciences should teach you, it should not come from the people like me. I'm teaching social science. It should not really come from me. The teacher and the student must collectively decide what the social realities are. Because what I know as social reality is again coming from my own subjective position. I might completely overlook the privileges that I am getting, isn't it? And then you from the other end say, okay, no, you are getting a privilege. And I'm unaware of. So you pointing that out makes me realize, yes, this is a hindrance to what I am understanding and my understanding of social reality. So in that way, we cannot really be objective. We cannot see society as external in the way sciences sees the natural phenomena and processes external, isn't it? So how do we make more and more accessible? How do we get closer to the view of reality? We can never reach the view of reality, but we can attempt to go closer to the view of reality. So how can we go closer to the view of reality? Only by making or acknowledging a number of, or accounting a number of experiences, isn't it? Bring together a number of social worlds and then see that, okay, what are the reality, what the reality looks like if we can go closer to that, isn't it? So this is a dream. This is an aspiration that social science wants to work. Now, how will we do it? This proposition appears a workable proposition, but how do we do it? We do it, and the easiest way to do it is through university spaces that bring people in the university. Because the university then becomes a site where people from multiple subjectivities come together and try to create that knowledge, isn't it? How will you otherwise do it? You meet friends and try to create knowledge, which is not really a viable option. Your friends would stop talking to you, isn't it? At some point, you will have conflict. But in university space, where the purpose entirely is to create knowledge, to learn, to teach, isn't it? To make ourselves aware of the social realities, this is the possibility. And therefore, teaching social science in universities is an exercise which makes complete sense, and which makes sets target which is realizable. Okay, so this is what we try to do as social scientists in the university. And I'll take you in the last part of my discussion, I'll take you back to the title of the talk, the joys of doing social science. So that joy, I am saying, is coming from being in a university where you get to know what multiple subjectivities are, isn't it? How people are perceiving the social reality, what they are overlooking and why they are overlooking, what they are looking and why they are looking, what we look and overlook and the reasons for it, isn't it? So all of it, when it gives us or produces curiosity, it makes us much more humble, isn't it? Because when then we realize that, okay, it's not the other person only who is not seeing the reality, it's us also who is unable to see the reality. It makes us humble, isn't it? It has to make us humble. We cannot really claim, okay, no, I am the messenger of God and you are not, so I know the reality, because there is no revelation process which is going on anyway, isn't it? So whatever we are knowing, we are only knowing through our own observations, and science teaches us the fallacies of the sensory organs, and social science teaches us the limitations of objectivity and the positions of reflexivity, isn't it? So together, the curiosity, the civility, and the courage it gives, isn't it? We are always afraid that, okay, university spaces become the spaces from where all kinds of protests erupt. Why does it happen? Isn't it? So, say we have targeted different universities at different point of time for the same reason, but why does it happen? Have we ever asked that? If it is a pattern which we have been observing for last many years, isn't it? We cannot say that, okay, this happened in 2016 or anytime. So, isn't it? We know in India we have a long history. Globally, we have a very long history of protests erupting from universities. Why does it happen? Precisely because of the same reason that multiple subjectivities, experiences come together, interact with each other, and make this journey of understanding this world, the human societies, more and more enjoyable. So that's all from me now. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Thanks. And we'll see if there are any questions. This- let me tell you, while waiting for questions from others, somebody's saying it's the best session.
Oh, thank you.
Today's the last session. Today's the last. So it was good because it kind of wrapped what we were doing since beginning. Language. But we started with language, then we did biology sciences, we did history, morning was economics. But what he was saying is, I'll put it in a different way. I don't think we have techno-managerial solutions for today's problems.
Yes.
And we have been attempting to solve that using nothing against it. I'm trained as an engineer myself, nothing against engineers who are working hard there. So unless our solutions are grounded in social sciences, solutions won't be sustainable. It will fail. We may actually amplify some of the problems in the hope that we are solving it. So it was quite interesting. Let's see, are there any specific questions? It kind of delayed, but that's fine. Any last question? Any comments we can take? Otherwise, we're going to. Let me see what are the questions being asked. How do you stay connected with? I mean, somebody's asking me directly. How do you stay connected? I don't know which part of the country you are, but if you're anywhere closer to the Bhopal campus, one way to stay connected is to visit the campus. But if you're anywhere closer in this part of the country, which is Bangalore, come to the Bangalore campus. That's one way. Otherwise, we are not going to spam you with too many emails. We have not, of course, we have collected your email ID. We would want you to reach out to us and follow what we put out on our social media pages. Uh, we will not be calling you, and we're not into the game of. We don't look at education as a commodity to be sold, if I can say so. So stay in touch with us. And this, if you have to summarize, the idea of this session was so that when you look at your school subjects, let it be civics, geography, economics, you look at it through a different lens, a different idea, rather than just trying to remember and get marks, right? So the assessment in the country is still about remembering. It's called time test, but what the faculty were trying to do is to give different kind of perspective and lens to look at the school subjects. So if there are no questions on that
There,
note,
there
we
is
should.
a question. There's a
There is a
question
question. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm very bad at looking at chat messages.
from Medha Gautam. How do we utilize the multiple subjectivities that meet in universities? That's what I was trying to say, that, okay, think of the participatory and the democratic ways of teaching learning, isn't it? So rather than somebody deciding a syllabus for you that what you should be learning, why cannot the students and teacher collectively decide what they should be learning, isn't it? So that is a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And for social sciences, there has been number of there have been a number of experiments in that direction, and very fruitful experiments where students from multiple subjectivities decided what they want to learn in universities. Okay, so for instance, one of the projects that students were given was to decide, okay, what are their immediate problems that they're facing in the new campus. And then they realized that, okay, there was something which everyone was facing, was the problem of rent in the locality. So then they started researching on how they are finding it difficult uh, to really get a place to live, the rent that they are paying, the facilities that they are getting, all such kind of things, and why there are so much of variance, isn't it? Some students find it accessible to get houses, some are not finding accessible. So in a society which is very mixed, this becomes a problem, isn't it? So let's say what is happening in India. So people from different castes, religion, community, they are barred from certain locations. So once we sit together with multiple experiences, okay, so how do we see the same problem? And we enlighten ourselves in very different ways. So something which I always thought, okay, a person will not find it difficult to find a rented house, certainly is shocked and surprised by the experiences of the other. So we cannot really ignore it. We have to account it and then try to make connections. Why this person experiences the way this person experiences. And there you realize a very classic line which people uses is that individual problems are not individual problems. They are social problems. Okay. So once we get to that position, that individual problems are social problems, that's where we begin. And then you can just imagine, I can just imagine, and we do not really have a lot of time to go through all of this, but one can imagine the uncovering of realities that this may do.
There are times I felt, Sharif, that some of the technical programs, like let's take engineering for example.
Yes.
Whatever they're doing, it can be computer science or mechanical, electrical, whatever. Should they be also not be exposed to sociology of modern India? So, in that way, then we have better solutions coming for the problems of India rather than they waiting for the multinational corporations to tell them what problems to solve. So,
True. True. And thank you for asking this question, because it makes me think of one other thing that which might people misunderstand. That I am trying to say that there is a kind of hierarchy between sciences and social sciences is much more useful compared to science. I'm not saying that. We all know what is the importance of science, and we all know that there is no finality to science, and science is or at least has this space of exploring, let's say, myths, the example that I give you, or what the social life is. The moment science, as you're saying, was the engineering student studying modern India, so the moment sciences starts exploring what the social reality, social world is all about, that makes the whole teaching learning experience a very different experience, and
yeah,
much more useful.
yeah.
So that crisis we always feel, and why that decline in curiosity from kindergarten to 12th graders, that we always feel the distance that comes from our position and the society's position, isn't
Yeah,
it? We
yeah,
don't
yeah.
find that connect.
That's
So how will we find that connect? Only when we are really connected to the problems which are very immediate to us, isn't it? And that is why, is whatever you're saying. So what IITs are now doing, that they're making this a mandatory thing, and they, most of them have the humanities and social sciences department. The engineering students do opt for courses from this department, but still we think that, okay, much more integrated ways of doing so. So we at Azim Premji University, for instance, have this school called Arts and Sciences, isn't it? So we are imagining it in a much more integrated way.
yeah, yeah. True, true, true. Here, even if they're doing BSc Biology or BSc Physics, they have to go through that common curriculum with that understanding in their component. The idea is that. Idea is that. Yeah,
Mix the major and the minors, obviously.
correct. Mr. Major in the minor too. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I think that's the thing.
if you're doing a
Absolutely.
biology minor, a physics minor,
Yeah,
it's an interesting idea. And archaeology minor, very interesting, very
correct.
fascinating. We, in our time when we were at universities, we never got these
It was
options.
very, yeah. I'm still older than you. In the sense, there were very hard boundaries.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hard boundaries. Although we had a little bit of social science coming in, but it was like Namke was they done and forgotten kind of thing, right?
So the maximum extent we could go was in interdisciplinary courses was logical reasoning.
Yeah,
That
yeah, 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 yeah,
farthest we could go. We could
yeah.
not enter into the science blocks.
And we are doing public reasoning, by the way, at Sunit University. So anyway, today's session was not to talk about Azim University's program, but if you're interested, I would also tell that if you're in the class 12 or you know somebody in class 12 looking for a good higher education program, ask them to look at Azim University's BA and BSc programs, and especially the Bhopal campus admissions is on. And we look forward to have more sessions. Maybe some of you have given us feedback that a summer workshop is done. Can you also do a winter workshop? And on that note, I'm going to ask my colleague Sadaf, who is there, whether is there any closing comments, Sadaf, that we should tell everybody? They've been a wonderful audience. Of course, I don't have to thank my own colleagues, but I'm also thanking all of them who. There were 9 speakers, if you remember, starting from. We had 4 days and 9 speakers did, did this for us. Any closing comments? You need to unmute yourself. Can't hear you.
There are two more questions, I think.
Okay, if you can just read.
Uh,
Okay, so there's a comment, I think, from or question from Rishak. Is though there is no perfect society, there is a society we aim to become like a democratic and tolerant society. By democracy, I mean a place with tolerance, coexistence, peace, socio-economic equality, etc. Okay, so this is a comment, another from Janvi Sujit. How far can we explore in the field of social sciences? Uh, how far do you want to go? That's my question.
Correct. That's correct. I mean, I think the question is, I think what probably she's trying to say is, let me put it the other way. There's a lot of news about the space mission, right? What are scientists or researchers do breakthrough in pharmaceuticals. But the work of a social scientist, let it be a political scientist or a political economist or a sociologist like you, that's done very silently behind the scenes. Their contribution to policy making or coming up with schemes for the government or how is budget allocation done previously, that's not known to the larger world or the role of an economist. So how far can you go, Janki? The question is, do you want to work with the state? Do you want to work improving the markets, or do you want to work with the society, right? So it's a triangle if you look at it: state, market, and society. How far you want to go is how, at what level do you want to contribute? Do you want to contribute at an individual level? Do you want to contribute at a community level? Or do you want to contribute at a very macro state level in policy making? So, uh, what do you say? Maidan pura khula hai, as they say in Hindi. But which subject do you like the most and have a depth of understanding in that discipline? Sharif is able to talk about science and connect with science and the curiosity because he's trained as a sociologist, right? And that's the thing. So, but unfortunately, I don't know whether I should be saying this. The work, the idea of work in your mind, in our minds, which has been drilled to me also as a child, is working in the service sector. Working in the bank, working in retail organizations, selling SIM cards, selling insurance policies. So that's kind of drilled into your thing. So that has you to think beyond all that, the traditional service sector, and look at what I call the social goods sector or public services. Right? You don't have to work inside the government. You can work with the government. So it's about career opportunities. I can go on, and that's a separate session that we do as part of the outreach. Today was so yeah. And then, Rishik, your question, I agree there is no perfect society in that sense, but there is an aim. I mean, we have clearly written if you just look at the preamble of the Constitution, we have promised, the state is promising social, economic, political justice. So where are we? So if you just look at it from the lens of a child, are we able to promise a child that we are assuring you quality school education? Right? Are we able to do that? Are we able to tell a child that is in the mother's womb that I am assuring you that you will not be undernourished? Are we able to assure a child that after 12 years of education, we are promising you decent livelihoods and jobs? I'm just saying through the lens of a child. So if you just look at the life of a child in today's India, shouldn't matter which family, which class, caste, gender they're born. It's a long way to go, right? Long way to go. So yeah, so it's a journey. We have achieved a lot. I'm not saying that, but a lot more to be done. And it could be Vrishak, somebody like you, who may come up with interesting solutions for today's India, right? So on that note, I think we should end. It's a positive thing. I think I ended. Otherwise, I sometimes end up in a very dark note about.
Thank
I
you
think I
for
ended. Sorry.
So I'm telling to them, thank you for being a very good audience. All the
So,
second had this comment that students were really active and they were interacting and the questions were like really good. So they also enjoyed the sessions. Yeah, thank you. And I've shared the quiz link, so please attempt the quiz, and we'll send certificates by next week. So please wait till then. Thank you.
thank you, Sita. Okay, we can end the session now. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.